good morning, good evening, good night. Layer One Live coming at you hot. It looks like we got two people in one spot. We got Dimitri and Mike in the same spot for the first time. Are you guys social distancing well?
Yeah, it's 6 feet, even though it looks like it's not, but it really is. Trust me. We did the math.
What's going on today, fellas? We got a good episode. Ton of good stuff to cover that we'll get to in a second. A lot of community updates as well. Things are rolling here at Layer One, but what's going on with you guys?
Nothing much, man. Happy to be back, like the good old days. Fortunately, Pittsburgh, where we're located, hasn't been too bad with the coronavirus. So we made the decision to double up here, get back to the old ways. So if anybody out there listening or watching along, if we have some kind of missteps or whatnot, it's just trying to get back to the old situation here. But excited, man. Obviously, a lot of craziness going on throughout the U.S. and the world. So nice to have a kind of a little bright spot in the morning here.
Judging by the stock market, it's bullish.
Yeah, everything's bullish.
Somebody said unemployment and the stock market are finally correlated. Just one goes up, the other keeps going up. But appreciate you guys joining in the chat. We see Kieran, we see Scott. Thank you guys for showing up and being early for us. It looks like Manos missed the first call, but we'll see if he gets in here. But we appreciate everybody showing up. We do have some community updates to get to, but like Mike said, they are doing the double format there. And it's kind of throwing off our Zoom video. So if you guys see the talking points, we kind of had like a last minute thing there. So you can still see the breaking discussion, but we can definitely move on there. So ton of stuff to get to. Let's see what we have on the dashboard for today that I'll update shortly. We have updates in team news. We've got a little bit of a breaking piece of news, quick news, and then we'll hit Bitcoin, Ethereum, EOS, and Binance has a little bit of news coming out from them. Shun's in the chat. Kieran's in the chat. Nice to see you guys. Hopefully everybody's having a good Monday here. We could touch on it briefly, guys, but we do want to kind of send our condolences to everybody that's being affected right now by what's going on in the U.S. Hopefully you guys are staying safe. I don't want to get too far down the politics, but we definitely stand, in solidarity with those who feel injustice going on in the U.S. So hopefully everything can get resolved shortly, and hopefully you guys out there that are listening are staying safe.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of pervaded social media, news, kind of everywhere, at least in the U.S. So we like you said, we don't want to touch on it too much. It might come up a little bit in one of the stories that we have in the discussion piece, but obviously focus here is crypto, and hopefully Layer One Live here is a nice outlet away from the crazy chaos that just seems to be everywhere. So hopefully a nice break for everybody.
Yeah, Scott's in Los Angeles, so Scott specifically, man, stay safe out there. Hopefully, I believe, Scott, you're in the Layer One chat, so give us some updates on what's going on the ground there. That would be awesome. So a couple stats to get to real quick before we move on here. Welcome into the chat. Looks like we have 15 right now, right off the bat, so starting out strong. Good Monday to everybody. Let's hit some stats really quick before we get into a couple other community updates. We got top 5 countries by listens. That is U.S., that is Australia, UK, Germany, and Canada. So we appreciate all those folks listening around the globe as well as the U.S. Top 3 episodes, got to be BlockFi. BlockFi is absolutely killing it. It just crossed 1,000 views on YouTube.
Nice.
Ava Labs, yeah, you guys killed that episode, guys. Ava Labs is next, coming in at number 2, talking about DeFi. Number 3 is going to be staking facilities. And I know I've been saying Komodo is going to be on the platform, the Layer One, for a long time here, guys. We had some scheduling issues a couple times, but me and Dima finally got that interview done. It's going to be released on 6/3. I promise you, it's already been recorded. I just need to get it out. And then we'll have TBD at the end of the week, and then Roll, the personal token platform, is going to be on 6/9. So that is it for the stats. I have a couple community updates, but do you guys have anything for the community from this past week? Anything that stuck out in your mind? Dima put out his Sunday post.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna be doing that going forward regularly on Sundays before the next week of trading starts, for crypto basically. And it's good because it kind of gives people an idea of how different players and different participants of the market are positioned ahead of the next week. And it's pretty short, concise, kind of straight to the point. So yeah, I'll be posting those regularly, so you guys can be informed.
Yeah, I've been following along with those. Those have been nice. I mean, I feel like trading is one of those things where if you don't have any data,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of equally as screwed as if you have too much data.
Right.
So keeping it concise, focusing on, key metrics like volume or put call ratio or whatever the case may be are key there versus kind of waking up on Monday and seeing the action happening and be like, oh shoot, I haven't looked at anything yet. So.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's get into the episode here. Right before we start, though, I do want to give a shout out again to our community. We're really trying to make active decisions in kind of building this community, and you guys have been doing a great job helping us from the start. But going forward, Layer One is going to make an emphasis on the podcast and in the whole channel and the community being community built, right? Members that are in there right now, we want more activity from you guys in kind of helping us shape the direction of Layer One and where we go in the future. I think blockchain allows us to do that via like different dApps that we'll get into down the road. But for now, starting every one, we drop the newsletter. So we do have a Layer One newsletter that just came out. We're going to primarily be using this newsletter to kind of have a weekly wrap up, but certainly there'll be like some like additional info in there. Like I think people have been asking for the book recommendations. We dropped that on the Layer One newsletter. We use Substack, and so that first episode of the book recommendations is out. You guys can find that on the Telegram or I believe our Twitter platform. So anyways, the newsletter got dropped. That book vault's there. And the last piece of news as far as community goes is, Scott's asking where the newsletter is posted. I believe there's a link in the Telegram group, or the private group, but you can also
give it a check here.
Yeah, give it a check and see if you can link that for them. That newsletter, like I said, will have all the information that I posted. But starting the start of every month, guys, we're gonna be running like polls. Certainly there'll be polls like throughout the whole month, but for the most part on June 1st, on July 1st, going forward, we want to run polls and we want to have activity on those polls, and those are going to be a way we can judge engagement from the community in general. But we're going to run a couple polls after Layer One Live does wrap up, and hopefully you guys can engage with those polls. They're around kind of bettering the platform and the channel in general. And we're going to choose one winner and give out an undisclosed prize to one winner who is the most actively engaged. So if there's like 10 polls or 5 polls, 4 polls, and you guys are engaging in the most, you're going to be entered into all of them, or you're going to be entered that many times into our little pot here. And we're going to choose one person, and you're going to win the undisclosed prize. It'll be a good one. I'm not going to give you like hex or anything. So we should have a good time. But that I know that was a lot of community updates, guys, but that's basically what we're doing this month, and appreciate you following along.
Yeah, I just dropped the link to the newsletter in the chat. It's super simple. It's just, layer1.substack.com with the 1 being the number 1, as you know there. So even if you're listening along, you want to sign up, stay involved, stay in touch, just layer1.substack.com.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, we'll hit the breaking news, which kind of got thrown a wrench into when we started this call, because Mike informed me of some inside info a little bit. But I did have the breaking news here that in China's Yunnan province, and Dimitri touched on this last week, but there was a little bit of an update here. Apparently, according to this 8BTC article, the 64 facilities in the Yunnan province were asked to maybe shut down or dismantle. Partly this has to do with a reported explosion, essentially, that happened. And so the regulators are kind of coming in trying to figure out what's going on, and that will affect those using the hydropower plant that actually had exploded, so, or at least in some form or fashion. So I was putting this article in breaking news. It does affect, local mining in China. Obviously, if you have an explosion at a power plant and the regulators come in, they want to know what's going on. Maybe people don't have so much laissez-faire as there is before. But Mike, you had some info for me when I put this in there.
Yeah, sure. So there's a basically a fund that we've worked with who's based out of China, and obviously kind of sent the info over. And the TLDR before I read the some of the response here was basically that there seems to be a constant confusion around regulation in China as it relates to local governments versus federal governments. So when something happens on the local level, it seems to be very easy to kind of position it as like a more of a federal lockdown or kind of drop, right? Whereas really it's just kind of one province, and even then can be a bit fuddy. So basically this person said it was total FUD, and that the opposite has happened. That national policy is to give decision making regarding mining to local governments. In Sichuan, there's too much energy because of widespread hydroelectric power. Then you also obviously have kind of the rainy season concept that happens in China too, where in the spring and early summer there's just an overabundance of rain, and thus the hydroelectric power is booming. So anyway, the government has basically opened up various industrial parks, like Q said, for energy intensive businesses. Let's see here, it's essentially just kind of the opposite of what this article is talking about. So it seems to me that just as the cases with anything, right, with any new business, especially in a field like Bitcoin mining where it's very unknown, you might have some little hiccups, some little kind of bumps in the road that then get mistaken for, hey, here is like the national government of China coming down, and this could be a really serious kind of result for the Bitcoin mining industry, and it just kind of snowballs from there, right? So it's always good to really not kind of place too much emphasis on news that you hear immediately, right? Try to go out, do your own research, fact check it as much as you can, listen to those folks on Twitter or elsewhere who are based in that region that the news is talking about, and see what they're saying, right? Are they immediately coming out and talking about, hey, everything's fine, right? Like this was an issue, right? People run stop signs, stoplights go out, kind of thing. Like it doesn't mean that the government is making driving illegal, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
I like the part where he talked about where basically you still have to register with the government, and you get in the still the bottom of the barrel prices when it comes to electricity, and the fact that mining equipment from Bitstamp the Bitmain is still like backed up until October in terms of ordering. Yeah, so like the demand is still there,
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the mining industry, it seems to be coming to a head here with so much activity happening in Texas, and a lot that the Layer 1 Technologies group is doing there in their effort to, as we talked about last week, I think it was, bring, as they would call it, repatriate a third of the total mining hash power to the U.S., all the while, with kind of the global economic outlook and the moves that China as a country are making towards, a national digital currency. It's hard to believe that they would kind of shut off what you could argue as like the most valuable resource when it comes to Bitcoin in general, right? I mean, if that government is kind of able to push that forward, it's gonna be hard for other countries or other private organizations to compete with the hash power, and the lead that China already has in hash power.
Yeah, agreed. We have some comments here talking about what we're getting at. I think King Lalibela said hydropower plants don't explode. The energy comes from the flow of water. So a little bit different there. I think there might be some electricity involved, maybe that can combust or some kind of thing. But we linked the article there. 1-2 is asking how we join the Telegram group. We will give a link to the public Telegram group here shortly, and then we'll let you guys figure out how you can get into our private group. Usually that requires DMing one of the admins in the actual public group. Kieran's in the chat talking about wanting a shitcoin where 99% of the supply is owned by one person. I'm guessing he's talking about my Hex joke. What else do we have here? Scott said his family and friends are protesting, so hopefully they're staying safe. So a couple people commenting here in the chat. Continue, guys, as we go forward. If you want to hear us talk about something specific in crypto, please let us know, and we will give that a shout out on the channel. So without further ado, I mean, that is breaking news. I appreciate you covering that, Mike.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad. I kind of saw that it came through in passing. So, yeah. Anyway, we'll move on to quick news here. I've got 2 stories. Dima's got 2 stories, and Q has 2 stories. So, both of mine are involving Coinbase, who, is continually active, and continues to kind of grow as one of the largest organizations of sorts within crypto here in the U.S. and in North America. Now, their Coinbase custody program has absolutely exploded over the last 12 to 24 months. I wasn't aware of this, but they separate Coinbase custody domestically and internationally, right? So they kind of have the Coinbase custody that they offer to folks in the US, and then have the Coinbase custody that they offer to everyone else outside of the US. From a regulatory standpoint, makes sense. It's a no-brainer. But the point of the story is that their Coinbase custody international side of things now supports the ERC20 version of Tether. They're accepting deposits and withdrawals, which kind of floated under the radar a little bit, all things considered with what's going on around the world. But this is absolutely massive, right? This is massive for Bitfinex. This is massive for Tether itself. This is massive for, the crypto community as a whole. Just as kind of some additional context for why I say that, right? There's a really great conference going on that's hosted by Messari right now called Mainnet. And they had the CEO of Paxos, the CEO of Circle. They had someone from Bitfinex. And then, they obviously had a moderator. And they were talking about how negative interest rates could affect the stablecoin business. And one of the things that the Bitfinex guy said was that, Tether runs a very lean shop, and they don't necessarily depend on positive interest rates, right? So all of the other stablecoins, really their business is revolved around positive interest rates, because in doing business, they're going out and taking on very short-term treasury bonds, right? So these are kind of the on-the-run bonds that you hear a lot about. And if those continue to get closer to zero and even go negative, now they will actually have to pay to run their business, which obviously doesn't work. So longer quick news piece here, but it's an important one. By Coinbase Custody International adding Tether, it's basically like it's kind of like the clean, pro federal government organization going to the, very dirty money kind of group and being like, hey, you guys are okay. Like, come on, right? We see the benefit here. We see the potential business of Tether and what Tether's been able to do in a lot of countries like China and kind of moving cash over the borders and whatnot. So we'll keep you guys posted on that. Lot to unpack there. But that's the first piece of news there. Big surprise for everybody.
I think if somebody told me like 6 months ago that Tether would have custody for Coinbase, I'll be like, get out of here, man.
Right. Yeah, it's
2020. Let's go.
It's nuts. So Tether continues to dominate against all odds. Last piece of news here: Coinbase is launching staking rewards for customers in the UK, France, Spain, and the Netherlands. So along the same theme, when you have all of these various negative interest rates, especially in Europe, if you can go and hold an asset that, while volatile, gives you, 7, 8, 9, 10%, that can, perhaps there's a way that some sort of product can get at only that staking reward. It's just a way for Coinbase really to expand their footprint when it comes to staking. I know the Swiss have done a good job, and the company Amoon have done a good job with Tezos and some other kind of staking ETP or exchange traded products over there. So Coinbase is launching for customers there. So they continue to expand, they continue to grow, and pretty bullish news this morning for Coinbase.
Boom, nice. So I'm going to be talking about Libra here in the 2 next pieces of news here. So if you guys don't remember Libra, right, Facebook, that whole thing's still kind of going on. So the first breaking piece of news here is that Calibra, which is like essentially the Libra wallet company, subsidiary of Facebook. They're just doing some rebranding. They're changing their name to Novi, Novi. And it kind of goes with just explaining how this company out of Dublin, they're we're pushing to create like 50 jobs to get people to work on this. But recent news like where some partners, major partners like pull out from basically being part of the Libra alliance, like Vodafone, PayPal, MasterCard, and Visa. Essentially kind of things a little bit slowed down a little bit, but it's very interesting to see how they're doing the rebranding. Now I don't know what the reason for that is, but they're essentially trying to project saying, hey, listen, we're still working to create this wallet to, spread around financial inclusion and so on, where people would be able to pay through Messenger and WhatsApp and so on. So it's like, it's going with the same narrative of, all right, the bank then bank type of thing, where you get people to move around their money in a different way.
Yeah, Mike's gonna talk about this. Are we getting? Oh, looks like we're getting some lag there. But Mike's gonna talk about this in discussion, I believe, right, Mike? You got this discussion about countries and governments. Yeah. Well, I guess that's a topic we all enjoy, so we'll wait till the discussion portion. Sorry for getting in your way, and sorry about that lag for those that are at home.
Yep. So moving right along, again, Libra news number 2. So as this is happening, right, there's a book that came out in China from one of the universities that's top university that basically provides education information for the political party in China. The book is called Discussing Digital Currency with Leading Officials. And basically it's saying that it can threaten the currency of the nation if we have more of this basically like Libra type of tokens, like digital currency and cryptocurrency and so on. So it's a little bit fuddy there. It kind of explains that, hey, this would allow U.S. companies to build a digital currency system through blockchain technology, which could threaten or even surpass Alipay and WeChat Pay. So there's a little bit of like a warning sign, that they're mentioning here in that book, and certain risks involved, and kind of in general, Libra has had pushback from many different governments, right? From Europe, maybe even in the US as well. Around the world, there was some pushback on Libra, and because, well, first of all, a lot of nations don't really understand, right, the impact of it, right? How can this, affect certain things? So, and this book, is basically the formal study that was done by the scholars that work in these universities. They investigated, put out their thesis and so on, what their opinion is, to kind of provide more light to the decision makers in the Communist Party.
Basically, the CCP is rolling up the propaganda machine a little bit here against Libra for obvious reasons. Exactly. Just as a final note on this, it's interesting. I was listening to some podcast. I think it was a Pump podcast because he used to work at Facebook, for those who aren't familiar with that. He talked about how the Facebook business division was just kind of a small little concept that was birthed in Facebook. Like, hey, yeah, we connect all these people, but what about all these people who own these small businesses, right? How can Facebook support those folks? And now the Facebook business unit is has revenues in like the hundreds of millions of dollars or something. So, if you kind of overlay a digital currency to that, there's a lot of benefits for users to come and utilize that currency to be able to work with, these Facebook businesses really easily, and vice versa. So,
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get to my quick news here, guys, I think we're sitting about 17 people now. So appreciate you guys hopping in the chat and hopping in the channel and joining us on this Monday. Before I get to this next piece of quick news, couple points. One of you guys, if you guys can go in the private Telegram group and drop this link. It looks like we missed dropping the link into our guys in the Telegram group. So if you guys can go in there and do that. Guys, if you are watching currently, you can go ahead and refresh your browser, and every story that we're talking about in story mode will literally be there in the description for you, so you can kind of click into the different articles we're talking about. So just a couple quick pieces of housekeeping. It looks like Mike just dropped that, so hopefully everyone is alerted there. Pickles in the chat now. Appreciate you coming in and stopping by. No jersey once again. I'm gonna have to get one myself. A couple quick news I got here. It looks like Minecraft is gaining a engine plugin. So basically, what EngineCraft is set up to do here, which is the plugin that the engine protocol set up, is allow people within their Minecraft servers to have non-fungible assets. So everything we've been talking about when we're talking to these NFT creators and metaverse and all these things, Engine is looking to take Minecraft, which is that probably the most popular game in the entire world, and put an engine plugin to an already existing metaverse. So that kind of flies in the face of kind of guests we've had on here. I know we've had Sandbox on here. We've definitely had some others that are involved in the NFT space, and I think Sandbox in particular is probably hurt by this because what you have in Minecraft is essentially a way to quest and all these things that Sandbox already wants to do. We'll see what happens with Minecraft and their adoption of things like this plugin that allows you to kind of trade in-game assets within Minecraft servers. So we'll see exactly what happens there. Kieran's in the chat saying Minecraft server ICO, and I do not doubt that whatsoever that will happen. Another couple, or at least one piece of news here. Passwordless login startup. So this has to go with authentication, verification, and kind of like reputation systems that we've talked about. It looks like this startup Magic has raised $4 million from a bunch of different investors. That includes the Naval Ravikant, or at least his fund. So a ton of investors joined here. I can name them off: SV Angel, Placeholder, Lightspeed Ventures, Volt Capital. And they're all investing into this startup who's looking to essentially create a Web3 authentication system for Web2 platforms. Basically, it allows people to seamlessly log in to different dApps and things like this that we kind of already see with MetaMask. So it might essentially be a MetaMask competitor. Also, I think they go into it and talk about how we can simplify keys for individuals that are non-crypto users. So ton of money being put into maybe onboarding people into crypto, which is never a bad thing. So that's pretty much it for my quick news. You guys, you had some?
No, I was just going to say, I really hope in managing so many different passwords across so many different websites and logins and whatnot, like the concept of passwords is kind of the equivalent of our parents, trudging through the snow to school, to our kids, right? Where it's like, you guys had to remember like 60 different passwords, like what, so something like that. I definitely understand why your big funds like a Placeholder and whatnot are looking at that. So that's interesting. Hopefully they do well.
Yeah, I was going to mention just the Minecraft news is super cool. If you take a look at Engine, and just like, their token went up like 61% just in May. So that was interesting. Somebody brought that up actually on the desk the other day, and I was like, "Wow, this thing is trading at an all-time high."
Oh, it's all-time high. I didn't know that. I guess the astute investor would kind of have seen this eventuality, right? Like their whole idea was actually plugging into Minecraft. They announced EngineCraft like so long ago. It's just whether they were going to pull it off, but it looks like they did. We'll see what happens. That kind of wraps up quick news. I think we're up to 19. I think I saw 20 there for a second. But guys, if you're joining the channel, appreciate you stopping by on this Monday. Comment, leave us what you want to talk about. We got a ton of cool people in the channel as well that you can talk to. You don't have to just talk to us. But we're going to move into the discussion portion here. Got a couple of cool things to discuss. We'll hit Bitcoin, Ethereum. I cannot wait to hit EOS this week. It was an amazing week for EOS. Markets didn't really care, but it was still an amazing week. And then we'll hit Binance. So, Mike, you want to take it away with the first discussion piece?
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna jump into discussion here. Hopefully, just as a side note, hopefully EOS is kind of late to that news. I think EOS is in a good spot here. As far as Dimitri's desk goes, I'm going long EOS right here. It seems ready to roll. So
We haven't covered it for some time.
Let's
so.
go.
Yeah.
Maybe tomorrow. Bring your bags, right? But
Yep.
anyway, yeah, we'll get into discussion here. BTC sitting just under 9,600, but Argentina, unfortunately, does not really care. So some interesting news that came out via Decrypt. Argentina is cracking down on local Bitcoin trading. So for those of you not familiar with the massive humanitarian crisis that seems to be boiling over in Argentina right now, kind of as some context, right? This will be the 9th time that Argentina has defaulted on their sovereign debt. So kind of fool me once, shame on you scenario here as we run into the 9th time. And obviously they are seeing an explosion of local Bitcoin trading. Again, this would not be obviously an Argentinian Bitcoin exchange, but more of peer-to-peer local Bitcoin trading going on, which is hurting their possibility of staving off any sort of large kind of governmental depression or the end of a government in the form of kind of some sort of humanitarian crisis or depression. So the Argentinian Financial Information Unit has said that they are going to be pushing for tighter controls on Bitcoin trading, as they obviously battle people trying to get out of the Argentinian peso and into other currencies or stores of value that are not so subject to hyperinflation. If you look back at kind of some of the more global macroeconomic issues that have been presented with Argentina, they were really already on the brink of collapse. And once oil fell to zero and then under zero, which is their main export, there was really no chance for them to recover. So they're kind of feeling the fallout of the issues with oil, and like I said, realizing that crypto trading in the country is posing a problem to them. As a final piece of context here, before we kind of get into the discussion, I pitch you guys on some thoughts. The current president of Argentina really ran on the concept of making Argentina more of an open market, kind of improving their economy by certainly exporting oil, but allowing people to trade freely with their money in and out of Argentina. It's any kind of weaker economy, that's a nice, pretty end goal to say, hey, we're going to build up the economy. The peso is going to get stronger, so strong to the point that we won't have any issue with you, trading in and out of that for dollars or for other fiat currencies. Well, of course, that has not happened. And, basically the president has gone ahead and put a lot of those capital restrictions back in place as of late 2019. So you can kind of see where this conversation is going, right? In a similar vein as your India or your China or a lot of these other countries that have tighter capital controls, obviously with much stronger economies than Argentina, they're seeing a lot of cash in the form of pesos leaving the economy, which is never good for that currency. It's good for the people, but the government does not seem to care about the people on that front. So my pitch to you guys and kind of my question to you guys was, obviously Argentina is an example of kind of worst case scenario when it comes to the devolving of a government and of an economy, right? I mean, they're one of the worst when it comes to hyperinflation. So understanding that crypto and Bitcoin especially can be very easily tracked by governments, is there any issue if other countries continue to expand, or continue to devolve, and their economy continues to struggle, that we will run into a scenario where these countries are able to track cryptocurrency transactions and fine or imprison or broadly make illegal the use of cryptocurrency? So big question there, very broad based, but we can start unpacking that.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Dima.
No, I mean, okay, I can go first. That's fine.
We're like both running from the question.
Yeah. No, I love this topic, obviously. Just a little bit of more context to just to add. I mean, Argentina is like, is dealing with the hyperinflation right now. It's like their inflation is like 44%. It's insane. Like it peaked at like 60%. So I guess when we said that the president start scaling back is when inflation start getting out of control, and inflation out of control for Argentina is like moving from like 25% to like 50, which is like like if it's at 25% or lower, that's actually somewhat okay. It's like a normal time for Argentina. And then also if you take a look at Argentina peso, it's crazy. The the chart looks like it's like some shit coins look
Like
like
an ICO that got a
Yeah.
SEC, charge.
It's crazy. Like if you take a look back in 2010, the conversion rate for like 1 Argentine peso per USD was at 25 cents. Now 1 Argentine peso is 0.01 cent.
Wow.
Isn't that insane, right?
Holy hell.
That's crazy, right? So the devaluation is insane. And Argentina has been obviously struggling for a long time, right? With this issue, and they seem not to kind of get it right. And also, with that, also people will be struggling, right, because of that inflation. So, and at the same time, if you have this one way out, which is local Bitcoin right now, you're saying that it can be tracked, but local Bitcoin you can't really track, right? Unless they kind of suppress that and stop people from or track them down, or maybe makes catch one person and make an example of them. That may be a thing. But if you really think about it, it's kind of like, okay, I understand people need to move their capital away from because of what's going on, but at the same time, if this continues to be allowed, then this will continue to escalate even further. So it's going to push Argentina into a more struggle because their currency is going to just continue to be devalued, and then what? It's going to turn into like Zimbabwe, like
Right.
like where you have $1, 1 peso bill would be $1 billion. So it's kind of like, what is the remedy for it, right? Like how do you like fix something like this? And it's something that they haven't really figured out yet. If that would be possible. For the moment being, what they're trying to do is just to prevent that outflow of capital out of Argentina, and people switching to dollars away from Argentine peso, especially right now, given what's going on globally, with the slowdown and the kind of the dollar strength and deflation. That definitely doesn't help in this situation, right?
Hey, Dima, I got some points to make here too, okay? Come on, man. You're just hitting all the points. I think we've talked about it a bunch on Layer 1, and you guys have brought up the stablecoin argument as well, and kind of that narrative being almost stolen from BTC. And I think that has merit. Like, I think USD is definitely way more of an enemy to these local currencies than Bitcoin could be. Just like super important to understand that aspect. I think if you did want to stop Bitcoin adoption in your country, I think you don't go to the individuals. I think you go to the businesses, and you make sure, because businesses are easier to track than individuals. It just seems to me that would be the place to start. Like, if businesses start accepting Bitcoin or start accepting some form of cryptocurrency, then it's kind of like no holds barred, right? Like, now things are being transacted within that country freely and at like a business level. Whereas if it's just peer to peer, it's kind of like backdoor deals. So I think they make hard restrictions on companies and businesses within these countries to stem the flow of adoption if they want to. I think USD and Facebook and Navi or Libra is going to be a way bigger enemy than Bitcoin ever could. So that's kind of my thought process when it comes to adoption in these countries. I think they're trying to get USD. They're not trying to get BTC that dropped 30% in like a 24-hour period.
Yeah, for sure. It seems exactly that, right? BTC is being used as a
proxy.
Yeah, as a way to get out of the peso and into Argentinian peso and into something else. So, I mean, really, when you look at an Argentina, when you look at a Lebanon, when you look at a handful of countries who are suffering this same kind of economic disaster, I guess it really boils down to a balance between, okay, are we is the economy in the country so bad off that, it's the choice between using cryptocurrency to get into something else so that we can buy food as choice one, or choice two, starving. Right. Like, and until it gets to that point, I think the governments have a real opportunity to, quell the involvement with cryptocurrency, but understanding that really only makes things worse for the people. That balance is going to shift eventually, where people go, you know what, like, I don't have a choice, right? Like, if I get some fine or I get thrown in prison, like, it is what it is. This is how I have to live, and it's a really unfortunate state of affairs for a lot of these countries who have not been able to succeed on the economic front for whatever reason. There's a great podcast that I know the three of us have been talking about with Peter Zahan that Pomp did, and Zahan, who's this macroeconomic analyst, essentially. He does a lot of work for some of the major macro hedge funds in the space, and I think he runs his own money as well. Basically said that Argentina is at a point where they're kind of screwed internally, and the next steps for them are another country to come in and kind of rescue them. Right. So obviously the U.S. has really kind of been that police officer of sorts throughout the world, and has done things to kind of move countries to dollarization. But the real issue temporarily is that because there's such a massive oversupply of oil, because Argentina's main export is oil, there's really no short-term incentive for any country, the U.S. or otherwise, to come in and spend a ton of money and spend a ton of resources and send troops in and make sure that societal structure exists, or try to pull somebody out of power and put somebody in if oil is in oversupply. So thoughts and prayers to the Argentinian people there. Hopefully cryptocurrency can exist as a solution to them. But this is something I think that is worth tracking, right? If you're somebody who quote unquote invests in cryptocurrency and you're not just storing value there, but also trying to make money, right? Buy low, sell high. It's always the goal. You have to be aware of kind of the impending battle between Bitcoin and between crypto versus so many of these governments, and really track, I think, the incentives that lie in parallel between the major countries who could do short-term to medium-term damage to crypto, right? Like your US, your UK, your China, some of these. And if it gets to a point where starting to put restrictions on Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, whether they can or not, right? Starting to do that, if those incentives align, where something they can do that will benefit them, that requires them to do something bad to Bitcoin, shut down crypto businesses, or restrict transactions, or full out make it illegal in some form or fashion. That is probably the most bearish possible scenario, and I think probably the riskiest scenario for crypto at this point, as it's just kind of leapfrogged into the macroeconomic microscope.
Yeah, go ahead, Dima.
I like what you talked about in terms of dollarification. That's something Zach from BlockFi mentioned, right? That's kind of the dark side of it, right? If you do allow people to shift away, right, then everybody's going to switch to a dollar, and then guess what? It's going to become like a colony of US, right? So that's the interesting part. But also, if you think about it, the government is going to start pressuring, like Q mentioned, maybe these businesses that offer BTC and so on. I think that they'll still continue to operate, because what's going to happen is that there's going to be demand for BTC, but the access to BTC is going to be at a shortage, which essentially gives the ability for those businesses that still operate to charge a heavy premium on top of the market price. Which, essentially it's like, well, then, okay, so I'm charging this premium, I'm getting all this volume, how much do I need to offset maybe some violations and fines that I'm gonna pay, so it really comes kind of down to that. So it's crazy because the government is going to start cracking down more on it, then we should see the premiums in those countries rise, right, for Bitcoin, which is these guys are paying over the market price, the significant premiums to get into BTC, maybe to shift into USD after. But we've seen something like this, happen like in Iran too.
It's an interesting, yeah. So I mean, basically, the government, it's like step one is you ban it entirely, and step two is, or you restrict it in some way, and step two is basically what you're saying is like, okay, well now, how can we set this up in a way so that it benefits us the most?
Yeah,
right? And it's just that classic kind of dictator's playbook, if you will.
Yeah, I'm interested in the personal security in these countries, and I think we're very fortunate in the U.S. and in Western countries, and even in many Eastern countries, at least if they're first world, like you don't have to deal with a lot of these issues, although there's some outlying cases. But I'm interested in like case studies on personal security in these countries, and what I mean by that is people saying and making it public that they own cryptocurrencies. How secure can you be in your personal health, right? And in that, well, I was in a Telegram group the other day when all these riots are breaking out, and the guy's like, hey, like I want to go down here and talk about Bitcoin. I want to hold like a big sign with rioters like saying Bitcoin, fixes this or whatever meme that is. But it's like, okay, now you're telling people who maybe, are unemployed and, don't have a lot of money and all these things, like there's a situation there that could arise if they know that you own Bitcoin. And I wonder how that plays out in these countries, not being a digital nomad myself where I'm in, different countries and having to deal with things like that. So I'm interested, like as cryptocurrency adoption happens in these countries, what this personal security is like. I also want to take the devil's advocate approach of saying like, what happens when it'll be interesting to see what happens when countries do adopt this stuff, or just like cryptocurrency in general, when you have Argentina start mining, or when you have Argentina start staking, like that, it's not going to look like, Argentina block producer, but it might be through a couple different proxies. And it'll be interesting to see the staking landscape change as countries start to get into this in mass, depending on like what their capital looks like. So
yeah, for sure. That's the game theory around like the various scenarios that could exist here. Just taking Argentina as the first example, right? Like you could have what I'm saying, where it's just like, hey, it's banned. Like the people are screwed until they are willing to kind of risk life, liberty, property to, not starve, right? Worst case scenario. Yours kind of sits in between there, where it's like, okay, well, the government's going to ban it first so that they can control it more and thus line their own pockets with, with relative fees or whatnot, which falls under that kind of dictator's playbook. And yours is more along the lines kind of on the positive side. And yeah, it's crazy, right? So like, let's say Argentina or Lebanon or Russia or China or any of these countries adopt crypto. It's like, okay, is that good for crypto then? Because these countries are adopting it and getting into governmental mining space, or is it bad because these countries are, doing things that the stronger countries like your U.S., your U.K., Japan, China, right, don't want?
Right.
You now exist outside of their economy that they're trying to control.
Iran is doing that.
Yeah, same. Iran's a great example, right? So it's like, okay, well, does the adoption short term kind of hurt crypto? The concept of like, go to Batman, right? It's always darkest before the dawn kind of thing, where it's like, hey, in order for this to actually get to where it needs to be, it almost has to kind of like battle through the worst case scenario first, if it's ever going to reach that full adoption. So fascinating conversation. We could go on for forever about this, kind of playing out the various scenarios.
For sure. And there's a ton of conversations to be had there, and we do have a lot of comments to get to, and one of them might be our third discussion piece. We always sit there before the episode and say, hey, each of us bring a discussion piece. What's up, Dimitri?
He's calling me out, man, on live air.
So I think we have a third discussion piece that we can get to before I touch on this block one situation. Situations sounds funny, but just like event. 1-2 had a great discussion point that I want to bring up to you guys right now. He said, "What would you guys do if the U.S. decides not to support cryptocurrency?"
That's a good one. I saw that comment as well, and I've kind of been thinking through it, right? And on the back of the Argentinian conversation, I think there is a balance between someone wanting to support something for some, moral higher ground or some sort of, somebody trying to profit off of cryptocurrency, right? Like, hey, I want to own Bitcoin because I think it will increase in value because I want to make more money, right? Versus, hey, I need to own Bitcoin because I need to eat next week, right? In the case of an Argentina. And I don't think, hopefully anyway, right? We don't seem to be trending this way, but hopefully we don't get to a point in the US where that need exists. So if you assume that, right, that we're not going to get to a point where it's like, hey, we need to own cryptocurrency because the government is so far overreaching or things are so bad, then you have to assume that balance always exists where, hey, it's one of those things where, hey, I want to earn cryptocurrency because I believe in, this kind of, non-sovereign, deflationary asset. But the other side of that balance is obviously, hey, well, I'm not going to do something that's going to like cause a $2,500 fine. Or if I'm a business, right, like I'm not going to risk imprisonment or risk the end of my business and financial ruin to support this, this asset class. And there will always be those that will risk that, right? And those are your kind of crypto pioneers. And I think if that happened, probably what you would see is a very elongated bear market. You would see, a much kind of murkier crypto marketplace that exists where you go back to the times of just those digital nomads, of just those folks who have the computer science experience, have the cryptography experience to be able to support Bitcoin in a way that they feel they're not kind of risking any sort of fine or imprisonment or anything like that. But, when it comes to mom and pop, right, if the government says, hey, if you touch this, we're going to shut down your business for 30 days. It's not going to happen, right? No one's going to accept Bitcoin as a payment. Your average kind of, Robinhood user, Coinbase user is not going to be buying it anymore and transacting with it if they even can. So, hopefully we never get to that point. But just like we talked about in the last discussion piece, I mean, that I think is the largest risk to crypto. If it gets so big and so many people adopt it that it becomes a threat to, the traditional economy that is government backed, there is short to medium term risk.
Yeah, I think honestly, I feel like if the U.S. was going to ban cryptocurrency and ban Bitcoin specifically, it would have happened in the last run up, right? Because it was at this point of like not being so large, but also like gaining enough traction where it started to become known in public, right? Like people started putting YouTube videos out on like major, platforms and talking about Bitcoin. So I feel like making it through that last upswing and now like continuing on, I don't see a point where like the US tracks back and they're like, okay, we need to shut down Coinbase and we need to shut down all of these ones that are like giving, again, like back to Argentina, like where do you go first? The businesses. And you're going to go to the businesses first and say, you cannot like serve US citizens, right? So I just don't see the US backtracking on things that they could have done back in 2017 and didn't, right? Like it was big enough then. I mean, it's still so small. And like, back to your initial point, like, is it good or bad if like a country gets in? If there's a country or a sheik or somebody with hundreds of billions of dollars that gets into crypto, 100x, man, like 100x good for the people that are already involved. No, seriously, like see, like one sheik, there's a meme, like literally one sheik buying Bitcoin is going to send the price up to 20K, because he's buying like $1 billion worth of it for just because he wants to. So like a whole country getting involved in Bitcoin is good for the people already involved.
And really like what kind of, I guess we're getting at it at a bigger picture. If you scope out and zoom out to kind of like 30,000 feet here, the way that I look at it is, you have kind of the various governmental boats riding across the sea here. You've got the U.S., which has the biggest boat. You've got China, they've got the second biggest boat. And then obviously you've got, kind of various smaller boats that represent various countries. Argentina, the boat's completely on fire, right? They're kind of varying degrees of health and safety and whatnot. And then Bitcoin is kind of like this little life raft that floats in between all these boats, right? And as various governmental boats make decisions that kind of, throw out ripple effects and waves, Bitcoin, it's either good for Bitcoin, right? And you see some sort of fundamental bullish event, or it's bad for Bitcoin and you see some sort of, fundamentally bearish event. But, do any of those events ever get to a point where it hurts Bitcoin so much that life raft doesn't just continue to kind of float along no matter what?
Yeah, and you could say that like Monero would be like the submarine.
Yeah,
of that. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to, where if you look at where Bitcoin is suffering in terms of restrictions and so on, is in those governments that it's threatening their currency and containment of like certain things that they're trying to achieve. So like in US, we don't have that experience. So the government doesn't see that Bitcoin is threatening US dollar because US dollar is still the global reserve currency and you still need US dollar to pay for commodities and so on, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff still exists, and I mean, transactions that like could be done that proxies through Bitcoin, there's really not that much effect there, right? So it really the governments really only care about when it gets to a point where it's like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like something like, we don't want this, this is going to significantly negatively impact our economy. Therefore we're going to ban it. So until
we're going to tax the shit out of
yeah.
Like, hey, Coinbase is making billions of dollars a year now because everybody uses this stuff. So, sorry, 20%, tax rate, kind of like they do with cannabis, so.
It's good.
Right.
It's
So
good
so if things were fine, like maybe in other countries, like and they were not experiencing hyperinflation or issues like that, it would not see capital pouring out through this proxy, then they wouldn't have, they would have crypto adoption. No problem. And this thing doesn't affect me, fine, dude, you can just keep on rolling. So I think that's what it will take. It really just breaks down to two pieces there, how you should kind of look at things. So it's like, as long as it doesn't impact it.
Just buy Monero is basically
this
conversation.
You guys had a lot of analogies there, and I'm sure Mike, the king of analogies, loved that portion of that conversation. But we had a ton of good comments as we talked about this. It looks like Shun is trying to be a suitor for some Argentinian women. He said, it's time for me to learn Spanish. I'm willing to feed some women there. We had 1-2 asking that question. He also said South Korea will be the leader of the cryptocurrency adoption. What else do we have? Shun said Korea is strong in adoption, but countries with weak currencies will adopt faster, not in dollar value, but in number of users. We had some kind of discussions on users. I think Crypto Pickle said it's so early you can barely even play a DApp right now. So I think he's talking about that user adoption. What else? Shun also said some countries will allow adoption. The price didn't care about the China ban. It will not care about the U.S. if all currencies start falling. And then probably the last comment here was King said, I believe if the U.S. puts its knee on the neck of Bitcoin traders, there will be a backlash. So a lot of good comments there. Keep it rolling in, guys, and we'll talk about it as we go. Sean also had one more chat, which I thought was pretty interesting. He said, I was vacationing in the Philippines and my BTC was great to support my expenses. I can withdraw cash using BTC. So looks like there's some good off-ramps there in the Philippines that we don't
What were the
know
fees on that? That would be interesting to know.
Yeah,
it's never, never cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, but super cool. I mean, to like that concept of being able to take one thing and exchange it into that country's currency is pretty awesome. I mean, I don't know what the Philippine currency looks like, but it may even end up that you got more bang for his buck.
Man, need to set up some ATMs in Argentina or something. Like that spread is gonna be crazy.
But anyway, we can move on here. Q, I know you've got the last topic here on EOS. Lots of EOS news.
Yeah, I
Pump
don't.
our bags, sir.
Yeah. Do we want to wait to talk about EOS? We could always talk about it in the EOS section since we spent so long on discussion. Do you guys feel like we
that's
can
fine.
move into Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Yeah. Do you want me to take? I'll take the Goldman Sachs piece here first, Team. I think everybody probably heard about it, right? There was kind of this. I think we talked about it on the last Layer One Live, right? There was this Bitcoin call that Goldman Sachs did, and in classic Goldman fashion, kind of came out and threw, as the article says, cold water on kind of this Bitcoin wave that we see with a lot of other investors that sit alongside Goldman, like your Paul Tudor Jones. Essentially the TLDR is that they said it did not fit a classification that would make it a store of value because of its volatility. They said it did not fit as a currency because it was too hard to transact, and basically all in all said that it was not a worthwhile investment for any of their clients, which I think is to be expected, right? I don't really understand the stance that people had where they thought Goldman was going to come out and be like, we are 100x long Bitcoin, right? Like Bitcoin is incredibly hard to value under traditional financial metrics, right? Another thing they said was that it does not provide any sort of dividend, right, like a bond would or anything there. And pushback that obviously most people in crypto had was, well, it's none of these things, right? It's not necessarily just a currency. It's not an equity, obviously, right? It's not a bond. It's kind of this brand new concept that continues to rework its narrative and continues to grow. And by trying to place it in some box, it's the equivalent of your kind of square peg into your round hole. So wasn't a huge surprise there. If anything, the bullish sentiment that comes with Goldman talking about this is that you can assume then that they had so much interest from their clients or from the various people that Goldman services around Bitcoin and around crypto that they thought it was necessary to come out and basically say, hey, this is our stance, right? Like, stop calling us about this shit. We do not recommend it because of X, Y, and Z. Now, if you play it out into the future, if this bullish sentiment continues, at what point does Goldman see the potential to make money by selling this to their clients? And thus, they don't care if it works out in the long term anyway. Like, hey, if I can take some crazy fee and my clients want it and they want to take that risk and they understand that risk and understand that, I'm just providing this service for them, not necessarily doing something that is going to, compromise my fiduciary duty to them, then they're going to do that. And like I said, I think this call kind of could act as an indicator that they're getting closer to that step. So not all bad. It was kind of hilarious to see the various, notable names and folks within crypto bash Goldman, who, is obviously an institution who, is one of the best in their field. So to have, some little wallet provider be like, hey, Goldman, this is why you're wrong. It's like, come on, bro. Like, what are you doing? So any thoughts there on the Goldman front?
I like how they compared Bitcoin to currency, which is like, bro, you got to keep up with the times, man. We're not doing Bitcoin currency anymore. Yeah. We're not doing that thing. We already passed it, man. It's a commodity now. Store of value, bro. Get with the program.
2013 called, right? That was the meme. Yeah. 2013 called. They want their FUD back.
But yeah, I mean, it's like, you never know, man. Like with these Goldman guys, they can be just in the background creating products. If there's interest from the clients, they obviously can create it, capitalize on that. They're going to keep their risk, as low as possible. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this like reeks kind of like of the JP Morgan stuff too, right? Where JP Morgan was first coming out, and now they're like completely, rolling out some different tools for their ability to kind of hold BTC. So the best part of the whole report is we believe that a security whose appreciation is primarily dependent on whether someone else is willing to pay higher is not a suitable investment. It's like, what the fuck? Like, what is mostly investing in gold?
Stock market?
Stock market, like anything.
What?
That's what didn't make any sense to me.
You're saying like, hey, you should not speculate on this because it's speculation. That's like conceptually.
Hold USD.
Yeah, like conceptually, a lot of people point to that or struggle with that fact because it's hard to over the last 11 years now point to like one main utility that Bitcoin serves to say like, hey, here's the utility, and because of this utility, it will go up in price.
Yeah.
Right. So they square peg it into the round hole and say, well, does it act like a bond? Does it act
Yeah,
like
yeah.
no, it doesn't. So it's purely kind of this adoption phenomenon. I think there's some merit to that, but it's hard to it's just so hard to throw Bitcoin into those those metrics or those kind of evaluation schemas that have existed for so long. So it is what it is, right? Like I don't think Goldman coming out and shitting on Bitcoin is really changing anybody's mind about how they see Bitcoin, at least those who have been around for a little while. So important to touch on, but obviously long term, I would say if anything, it's good news for crypto there.
Boom. With that good news for crypto, I got some bearish stuff for you guys. I know you guys are waiting for that, so I got the prime FUD for you. So there's this report that comes out from glassnode.com, which is pretty detailed in terms of they basically measure kind of the metrics in different sectors of BTC, like sentiment, liquidity, network health, and so on. They give it a score to kind of identify where things are, and see how things are kind of performing in each sector, which is great. But the thing is, it talks about basically how after having what they're noticed, obviously the drop off in the miners' revenue, and the interesting part that they actually pointed out is that the fees actually went up while the transactions did not. Usually the transactions, when they go up, the fees will go up with that. But it was interesting that they noticed that the fees were going up while the transactions were not. That was like that correlation that actually kind of broke off. And there's warning signs as far as the hash rate and stuff goes. And I've talked about it a little bit on the desk, but if you take a look at the overall miners revenue, we are at the level right now where we've been there before. We've been there in like 2019 April, so it's like the miners revenue, even though it did drop off, right? We went from 20 million to 9 million, post that halving. But overall, it's kind of coming back to the levels that we've seen back into 2019 for miners revenue in USD.
Yeah, for those that can't see it, it's basically a 3-year chart that looks like we're, on that 3-year chart, we're sitting at all-time lows, or even with, some of the other lows. So it's not good,
right? But
it's also not like, hey, the network is failing.
Right, yeah. Exactly. And the hash rate as well. The hash rate has been falling. We know that. So that's kind of normal stuff from post the halving side of it. To see something like this and kind of things are shifting around, which is interesting. The point that they're trying to make is that given like what's happening with what they see as far as the indication goes between the network health, liquidity, sentiment, where they see deduction points based on their metrics that they use, they're saying that it's possible that BTC might see some bearish consolidation because of these things going down.
Some bearish news from the bear. All right, nice.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin mining revenue is important because this is obviously how miners get paid outside of the block reward, right? So as Satoshi devised this originally, the thought was that you would mine a block and you would get paid, but also every transaction, the miners get a piece of the fees via revenue. Now, the problem becomes over time, if everyone's treating Bitcoin as a store of value and not transacting at all, those fees disappear. While again, over time, at the same time, the block reward continues to have. So 10, 20, 30 year time frame, miners continue to make less and less. And if Bitcoin's price obviously does not appreciate in line with that, it gets to a point where mining Bitcoin is not profitable, right? That's kind of this mining death spiral that everybody talks about. And this is why companies like Glassnode monitor this stuff and why it's important. Now, energy prices have consistently been going down, which is another metric that is important to follow. So, unless there's some sort of giant spike in energy costs over the next 10, 20, 30 years, alongside the potential for miner revenue to continue to decline both via fees and block rewards, then you find a problem with kind of this network health that they talk about. But from an energy standpoint, things don't seem to be trending that way, right? Things continue to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So kind of it's that long-term FUD game.
Yeah.
That 100-year FUD, man, we need it. But how do they factor in the amount of people that are coming into crypto, right? Because you're saying, okay, most people are starting to hoard, or the people in the community are holders more than they are kind of like transactors of anything. But how do you account for many people think that we're at like 1% of who could adopt crypto? Obviously, we're sitting like, of the world population, it's very low. So as more percentage of people in the world start to adopt crypto, doesn't that send the number of transactions higher?
It does, yeah, and thus the fees go higher, right? And that's kind of what Deem is talking about with that spike that we saw around the halving.
Yeah.
The halving, if anything, is it a giant marketing event for Bitcoin that happens every 4 years, and everybody gets in. And some people stick around, other people get wrecked, and buy it at 10K and sell it at 6 or something. But for that period of time, when there's this giant influx of new users to Coinbase or to Kraken or to Binance or
you see those things crash, the platforms crash.
Right. Yeah. The fees go way up for miners because of all this activity. So you're exactly right. It's another piece of the balance.
Yeah, I love that. I think this was most of the people who I got into crypto, not at all-time highs. I'm not that bad. But most of the people that I got into crypto actually like were messaging me and be like, is my Bitcoin going to halve? And I don't know if like we can name it something else, guys, but it seems like halving, it just doesn't, like, for people that aren't into crypto, I got a lot of messages saying what's going to happen to my Bitcoin essentially. So I know, just a stupid little story there. But anyways, we're going to hit Ethereum here, guys. I'm going to go over some comments. There were some comments about EOS, so I will say this week's EOS is like the most bullish shit that's come out from EOS in like the past 6 months to a year. So there will be no FUD on EOS this week. So
not today.
It says 1-2. That's why. He said, let's see. 1-2 said, I love FUD. Crypto Pickles said, if you love FUD, join the EOS community. Let's see. Kieran saying, this is my third halving. They were all mostly non-events. Shun said, I see it bullish. The miners will have less BTC to dump in the future. So, and then 1-2 comes out with a huge bullish comment saying Bitcoin is going to be running on EOS.io. So bang, bang. But, before we get to EOS, let's get to, Ethereum and everything that's going on there.
Yeah. So I got this first piece of news, and ETH is obviously running hot right now as far as the market price goes. But we got some interesting news in regards to SEC. So Securities and Exchange Commission basically charged this one ICO that happened back in the day in 2017. It's called BitClave, and basically they said you have to return all the funds that you raised in that ICO, which is 25.5 million. And they've agreed to do that, to return all the funds to the investors, which is going to be very interesting how they're going to do that. But on top of that, also, they're giving back money with an interest, which is 3.4 million that is going to be on top of that 25.5 million. And then a penalty of 400,000 as well. So these guys are just getting wrecked really by SEC.
13% interest rate if you do the math.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's crazy. When I first saw this, the first thing that came to my mind was, these guys still have the investors' money? They still have 25.5 million? Really? Like, dude.
I have more. No, seriously, they raised 25 mil in ICO. If they raise that early enough, it could be more, couldn't it?
If they sold the top.
Yeah.
Close to the top. Yeah. I mean, God, it could be you know,
100.
it could be hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah. But
Yeah.
knowing the way that that scenario played out, it's probably like 12 million. And,
Right.
you know, yeah.
But it's interesting to see, like, if the fact that they agreeing so easily to, like, hey, listen, we're just going to give back the money, whatever, you just do the calculations with pay interest. I think it does, make a case that maybe these guys did end up making quite a bit of money, by holding that. But it's like, well, what's the deal with BitClave then? What is it? Was it just a scam, or these guys didn't even do like anything, like not create anything, like, or was it just a failed like business plan, like, and like, how are they going to return money to the guys who bought an ICO? Like, what? Like, was there a KYC done? There was no like KYC done, right? Like, what are you going to send the tokens? Like, how are you going to send the money back to the wallets? Like, how? Like,
It's got to be a scenario where you basically kind of, open the door and say, hey, if you invested in BitClave, come in and prove that you did, and we'll give you the money back, kind of thing.
like restitution.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I remember BitClave back in the day. Like they were a decently large ICO project that was making the rounds, and this seems to me like one of those things where, kind of on the, I think it was ICO box or ICO bench, where it's
one of those guys
where it's like, hey, we're at the top of the ICO business boom of the peak, right? We're going to create a token that represents our future growth in something, right? Or how we think the business is going to pan out. And then literally just nothing happens and they can't execute on anything. And then it becomes like, okay, well, like you didn't execute on anything, so this is clearly a scam, kind of thing. And it's always a balance between, is this actually a scam, or was this just a group of people who were not at all equipped to do what they promised to do? And I think that's where the SEC comes in and says, hey, you sold something that is a security that represented some promise that you were never able to fulfill. So thus,
I wonder how the SEC looks at this, right? Because we've seen the precedent from the SEC, Block One, for example, where they're having to pay a certain amount of money, a certain percentage of raise, I'm guessing. I wonder why they didn't just take the fine, right? Like 25, it had to be less than 20 mil, what their fine was going to be. I mean, I'm just speculating here, but like they probably could have took a fine less than the amount of 25 mil that they're now giving back plus interest. So I wonder how the SEC looks at this. Because there's been
the SEC.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think like in thinking about how this went down, if I'm a BitClave and I'm holding all of this money and I have many, many folks complaining to the SEC about this, right? And saying, hey, these people took my money. The website doesn't exist anymore. There's this organization that is holding all this money. I want my money back. And the SEC goes to BitClave and is like,
what's up, bro?
What's the plan?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like BitClave is in a scenario where they're like, all right, well,
we're just
let me hit you back tomorrow. I'm kind of busy right now. Like there's no negotiation. Right?
Yeah,
the SEC says, this is what you're going to do, or we're going to throw you in prison. And that's kind of how it goes down. And depending on how that process goes, and obviously how afoul of laws the people in the project will to some degree determine what the SEC does.
Makes sense. That's crazy. It's like also opens the door, right? So it's like to maybe some others that are following the same path. So since we have this one, this first one, it's the next one. Win XRP, send money back.
I think to Mike's point, right? Like if you have a product and like you're pushing forward and you're doing all these things along like some sort of like guideline and roadmap and all these things, I think they look at it subjectively there. So yeah, good point. Guys, we're up to like 1 hour and 36 minutes. So we're pretty far into this episode. We kind of want to stay under 2 hours. So let's fly through this next Ethereum news and let's touch on EOS and then finish up with Binance.
Yeah. So just really quick, options are heating up for ETH on Deribit. So, there's a huge volume that's coming through for options. It makes sense because of the volatility that's going on there right now. We're obviously going to take a look at that more, on the desk tomorrow to see what's going on. But options are, heating up. I think could be paired up maybe with ETH 2.0 speculation,
Mm.
so people are trying to capture and speculate, and options offer pretty good leverage.
Yeah, I mean, based on the volatility that you see in crypto, even with Bitcoin and ETH, which as far as I know are pretty much the only assets that are traded on Deribit when it comes to options. As more and more sophisticated investors come in and know how to trade options, that volatility just opens up the door to make so much money if you can position yourself appropriately in options, whether you're hedging, spot or futures positions as well.
Or
So
just market making.
yeah, or just market making, right? Like Deribit continues to blow up as the only real viable place to trade options, assuming you're not kind of falling into a regulated sandbox as a larger money manager. But it's good to see, right? Like options have become a giant talking point within crypto, and it's just on the financial side a necessary evolution. So good to see there. I'll hit this last piece on ETH, kind of along the same context of privacy and Monero being that submarine like we talked about. Vitalik has tweeted a little bit about some interesting privacy developments that are happening on Ethereum. So evidently in a virtual hackathon called Hack Money 2020, there was a privacy protocol called Umbra that was developed, and couldn't have been at a better time, according to many in the Ethereum space. This thing was built in only 23 days, but is already live on Ethereum's testnet Ropsten. And as some context, as I always like to do, right, the reason for this and the necessity for this is that as the various Ethereum kind of domain names become more and more prevalent, where if you look at Vitalik's Twitter, I think his handle is vitalik.eth. If you look at Decrypt, the company that wrote this article, it's very easy to send them money because you just enter the name .eth, right? It's a the concept of the Ethereum name service basically. But for all that usability comes the ability then to obviously track anything that Vitalik sends to and from his wallet. Decrypt.eth, right? Same thing. So there are necessary privacy concerns that come with the UX or UI improvements that a name service would bring to Ethereum. So Umbra's trying to solve that. There's not a ton of info in this article about kind of how it works, but they're basically using smart contracts in order to enable these kind of quote unquote stealth addresses, on top of the Ethereum name service setup there. So
yeah, excited for this to become more mainstream kind of private transactions and things like this. So we'll be tracking that for sure. Privacy on Ethereum. I know there's a lot of different platforms and protocols and applications that are trying to solve this, and Monero being one of them, obviously. So we'll definitely keep track of that, guys. We are a minute or an hour and 40 in, not a minute and 40, but we appreciate you guys following to the end here. We have EOS, we have the EOS news, the blessed EOS news that came through, which we'll get to in a sec. But I want to shout out to everybody that's commenting along and following us along. It looks like we're at 21 now. We're kind of like oscillating between 19 and 21. So we appreciate everybody that's in the channel now. If you're a first-time viewer, this is kind of just like news that we go over each week. Layer 1 Live, we do this every week at 1. And then we do interviews all week as well as Dimitri's desk. So if you're here for the first time, subscribe. If you're here and it's not your first time, you already should have hit the like button, but do so now. But we will get into the blessed EOS news. Thank God. We've been talking about Block 1. We've been talking about Block 1 for, I think, a year now, man. I feel like I've been talking about on Layer 1 Live for like 6 months. Block 1 needs to get more involved. One of the reasons I'm in EOS still is because of the Block 1 money, yada, yada, yada. You guys have heard this over and over from me. And finally, Block 1 came through with the news. So there's 3 pieces specifically that I want to get to. One, I'll get to real quick. Saeed Jeffrey from the EOS Cafe block. We talked about it before, but Block 1 came out and finally finalized this, the 200K challenge of running that Ethereum virtual machine within EOS. he finally is getting his money. So he's getting 200K. It's affirmed by Block One, and congratulations to Saeed from Cafe Block. That was huge. So again, 200K right to a developer for doing big things on the EOS protocol, and we're happy to have Saeed in the ecosystem for sure. The two next things, one has to do with Block One, and that's going to be a major discussion. But let me get to the next thing before we get to Block One. EOS VC, $1.7 million went to 50. Is it 56 or 36? I'm getting it confused. But $1.7 million at 50K a piece went to, I believe, 36 different projects, 34 different projects. And I can get into the projects now. Let me see if I can pull up these recipients. But here's Block One or ESVC kind of reaching out and giving out cash to developers to build eventually on EOS.io. Now, some of these are already building. I think, Karma's on here. I'll go through some of these that I know just off the top of my head. Genobank, let's see, Herd, Karma, LimeChain, Nougat. Nougat was one of those companies that won a hackathon. Outplay Games. EOS Writer actually is from Writer. I forgot what it's actually called. The Writer Company, the company or the website that we actually use for our EOS News, got one of these grants. So the Writer Company, True Origin, ton of different companies that are building various different things on EOS got 50K each as a part of this EOS VC grant, $1.7 million. Something that I hope they will continue to do as time goes on. But it's good to see this amount of money going to these smaller, companies. I think the main thing this is pushing, right, is small applications and small companies gaining just a little bit of a runway, essentially, right? Like, this isn't like 500K. This isn't $1 million. It's not coming from traditional investing, venture capitalists and things like that. It's just, hey, let's try to promote, building on EOS.io in small levels where these guys aren't receiving, traditional venture investments. What do you guys think?
Yeah, and to your point originally, right? This concept of being bullish on EOS because of Block One's cash. They raised somewhere around $4 billion. I don't think they have $4 billion still. They're closer to the $3 billion mark, but just based on what they raised and based on what they gave out here, if you do the math, right, 1.7 million versus the 4 billion they raised, they have handed out 0.04% of the total money they raised, right? So if this is successful and allows for so many of these basically small developers to build something that delivers value to EOS, you kind of multiply that out and see what Block One can do now to help benefit the ecosystem, and that growth starts to become exponential. So I think I think this could, assuming it works, right, and assuming EOS VC, which again obviously isn't necessarily Block One, right, but if they can kind of figure out some solution that's scalable and works with regulators around the world, you're going to really start to see a lot of this money go to work. My question to you, Q, is where's Voice? What's the timing of Voice? Have we heard anything as far as kind of the next big launch date? Because having known EOS from the jump, they tend to like to kind of throw everything together from an announcement standpoint, give it a date that's like 6 months out, and then you start to see just crazy price action as we get up to like a Block One June or whatever they have in the works.
Well, it's funny that you bring this up because literally it is a year from the date of Block One June, right? So it's been a year since that announcement in DC, and I'm it's been a huge kind of year for Voice. I mean, it launched in beta, right? This essentially is like Dan's baby. It's like it's what Dan's working on. It's like Steam 3.0 essentially, right? I think the scheduling is set for sometime in 2021. But when we first talked about Voice, the main thing I was trying to tell you guys, and you guys agreed with me, was that, like, thank God it's in beta. Right? Like, thank God they didn't come out and be like, this is going to be one of the sweetest apps ever. Because there were certainly a lot of people in the community that were like Dan, groupies that were like, this is going to be awesome. Well, what we've seen is it's not, that popular, right? Like even people within Voice are like, hey, like you need to do this. There's still some iteration that needs to happen. So thank God that's launched in beta, because it's not as popular as maybe Block 1 June made it seem. So we're looking at like a 21 probably release for Block 1. That's what I've heard. Yeah, Crypto Pickle
basically,
saying, go ahead.
Sorry, so basically, are you saying that once a year we'll get bullish EOS news and now you have to wait another 12 months?
Yeah, just sob stories for the next 12 minutes.
And we made it. See you guys in a year.
Yeah.
No, I'm just messing with you.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think the Voice FUD is kind of like warranted, right? Like they came out and they were like, this is going to be competing with Facebook and Twitter, or I don't even know what the original assumption was, right? Like, or what they were saying. I completely forgot that speech, but they've kind of morphed it into something else, right? Like authentication blogging, like that has like obviously authentic users. It's tough to see, man. I'm not too bullish on Voice, but I am bullish on, giving small amount of money to people who are building the ecosystem. This is ground up stuff, man. So I think the other thing, just to wrap it up on ESVC, another thing that was really kind of a bad FUD on ESVC was that they originally came out and said these were going to be EOS.io like projects that they were going to fund, right? This was like back in the day, 2 years ago, I believe. I don't know the exact date, but basically since then, EOSVC has invested in projects on Ethereum and outside of EOS and not involved. Yeah, they've. I'm not saying they've invested all of their money in Ethereum projects, but certainly there's been some. So there was kind of like this ambiguous nature of like, what are you actually investing in? None of this shit looks like it's going to ever move to EOS.io or be on it. So EOSVC coming out in 36 projects or 34. All eventually they say are going to be utilizing EOS.io tech. It's like, this is awesome. Been a great week. But what were you going to say, Dimitri? Sorry for cutting you off.
They're funding all these companies and watch they switch to Ethereum. No, I was going to say, just it reminds me of back in the ICO days, we had this one, I guess, client or whatnot, right? Which essentially was, building on EOS and getting sponsored with the VC. EOS VC, they were getting money to build Veon. And we met them, like great guys, like awesome, right? They were building some kind of protocol. It's too technical for me to understand from my little brain. But anyway, so they were like, yeah, this is going to be like, working with EOS, whatnot. We're like, okay, great, that's amazing. And they were actually working with this other company. It's called Instaffo, which is essentially a staffing agency company that has your resume credentials and everything like that. And that VM protocol is supposed to kind of, keep your privacy of your information, and then you can transfer it maybe to different employers when you apply, whatever. Anyway, the whole point of this is that they did get the funding and they were working on it, and EOS invested in essentially kind of what is Instaffo, which is essentially not related to anything to EOS at all. It was just the investment into a business. So it's always interesting to see how, when we do get the deployment of capital, right, from these VCs, and certain projects will say, hey, we're going to build on EOS and it's going to interact with EOS. But, sometimes we've seen in the past that it doesn't turn out to be that way. Like sometimes those companies might not even interact with, with blockchains, at all, kind of, it's kind of like a business investment for a VC at the end of the day, right? So, there's obviously has to be a balance there, but I think what really is going to be bullish, is when we start seeing those projects that are actually coming into the EOS ecosystem, and we're seeing those delivered there. Because in the past we've seen some mixed stuff, in that side. Because from a VC standpoint, you invest in money, you want
a return. It's not
right. Yeah. I mean, is it going to work at EOS or not? I think the baseline for VCs is, am I going to get a return?
True.
Yeah. It's as we step closer to blockchain being something that these various businesses, like you're talking about, are seeing value in and wanting to use, you can start to understand what and why Block One has done to position themselves for that moment, versus going out and giving every little developer who wants to build some DApp or some game on the chain $50,000 or $25,000. Like, yes, in the short term, that makes the network look like all these things are happening. But if there's no demand for these games, and if there's no return to Block One or to these VCs who are, managing other people's money, then they're not going to do it. But if, and in Instafo and so many of these, small to medium sized enterprises start to need a blockchain to, save money or complete some task, some blockchain to provide some solution. And EOS is positioned not just with its tech, but with its amount of capital and its size of user base and offices in that geography or customer service or whatever it is, right? Like EOS becomes very, very well positioned when that moment comes. So it's important to remember the EOS VC is very different than Block One. I don't think EOS VC is the equivalent of Block One making the investment into these projects, as far as I know.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a couple of voice comments down there. That's Dan's GitHub is active. They have 300 employees working on it. So voice is essentially a little bit different, even within Block One, right? It's essentially Dan's baby that's working on it. EOS VC has come out, and like you guys are saying, this is good. This is a good move, right? Like this is essentially a good move based on what we've seen over the past year. So. We'll see if Block One and it continues to kind of roll out the funding alongside EOS VC as well, man. I appreciated that. I had a thought, but it completely blanked my mind. We do want to get to the Block One voting. That's kind of a whole nother discussion, right? So we will get to this. It looks like Block One had 2 years ago again. So we're going on long periods of time. We've had to wait a while. They had talked about being part of governance, right? And it seems like EOS New York is heading up this like blockchain engagement. I think it was called PBE, Public Blockchain Engagement Group. So EOS New York obviously works for Block One now. Like EOS New York is now abolished, and Kevin and the guys are working at Block One, and I think they're heading up this engagement initiative, which is basically you guys making that charge. I like it. Nice. I caught you.
Do not mind the man behind the curtain.
Okay. But essentially what we have, guys, is Block One getting involved in governance. So not only are they getting involved in funding, but they're now getting involved in governance. And this happened, in the same week, which is essentially why I'm so excited on this episode of Layer 1 Live. But just let's get down to the details here. 56 block producers over the next 6 weeks are going to be voted with Block One's weight of EOS tokens. I believe at a clip of 10 million, I'm guessing each week. So essentially they've chosen, I believe, I believe they chose 10 initially. So we have Gray Mask, Start EOS.io, OKX, Nudex, another Chinese one, EOS Weidong, EOS Rio Brazil, EOS Huobi, EOS Cafe Block, Bitfinex, and Attic Labs. Now there's some notable ones that were left off that list, right? Like EOS Nation, who we had on the podcast like probably 3 months ago or 2 months ago. But again, these are going to be rotated, and the reason being is because their votes will matter more if not spread out amongst 56. And then 2, you don't want to push out maybe guys who are just at that top 21 list. So like ones that they're not voting for, and then have all of these votes happen at once. So again, if they're voting for a smaller group, I believe it's not as many votes as like 10 million all at once. So there's a couple of reasons why they did what they did, but it's good to see EOS or Block One get involved in EOS governance. Yeah,
another step forward for sure. I mean, that's a lot of votes. So going to be some big ripple effects in the EOS community there for sure.
Yeah, how are they deciding who to vote for and all that stuff? We've talked about this event right previously, obviously, and the concern was that there might be some drama around this because it's like, well, how come they're getting Block One support and we're not? Right. We've been like since day one pushing all this stuff, building so on, and you got this exchange that's not doing anything, man. And you give them the votes, like what the hell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one point I want to make before we get into that, the point I was going to make earlier about EOS VC, Mike, was we talked with Jason Stallings in the Layer 1 group. And when we sent him this initially, I was like, hey, look at these grants. What did he say? Do you remember what he said in that group?
I don't.
Basically, he was like, these grants are a myth. And essentially, then he read the article and was like, oh, like it's not. And yeah. And so like the point I was trying to make there was I feel like that's the general sentiment from like the outside community, right? The outside developers, and like this was never happening. It's not going to happen, yada, yada, yada. So them coming through and actually deploying these grants is awesome. So that was the point I was trying to make before, and I got sidetracked. But and shout out to Jason Stallings. He's awesome. The Block Arcade team is amazing. They're frequently a part of the Layer 1 community. So appreciate Jason there. But Dimitri, to answer your point, there's like basically 3 standard guidelines, right? They need to have the general location of the node. It needs to be independently operating an API. And the API or peer-to-peer node is running EOS.IO version 2.0 or greater. So like those are the general requirements. But to your point, what then past
I thought everybody's running that, yeah.
Well, some nodes are before this. Everybody wants Block 1's vote, so I'm sure what happens here is when Block 1 comes out with these requirements, it raises the bar, right? Because they're like, oh, I might need to get this. If I don't do this and I miss out on the votes, then it hurts. So, but to your point, like nothing after that is given, right? Like so these 56 nodes, it's like, well, why did you choose these nodes? Like there's no transparency there of why these nodes were chosen. And there was some blowback actually from the community, and specifically a guy, Colin Talks Crypto. He covers EOS pretty well. I suggest you guys go check him out along with Everything EOS, who's made it into the chat. Not Gall himself, but a mention. But Colin was saying, and this is where the discussion piece kicks in, and I don't want to spend too much time. But he was upset that Block 1 came out and voted for these exchanges, right? Like he feels like these exchanges, specifically the ones that soft stake and don't tell the user. So they basically take the votes, don't tell the user that they're doing that, and are able to gain more control on the network. He feels like those nodes that don't have that toggle with the user, where the user can say, I don't want my votes used by OKX or Bitfinex, or I do, doesn't, and receive the APR. But he was upset that Bitfinex and OKX made it, and Huobi made it into this list. What do you guys think about that?
It seems kind of naive to me. I mean, the natural situation is that exchanges have such a large, standing, and a majority of Bitfinex nodes, at least last I checked, are in the top 21, right? So it is unfortunate to see Block 1 voting for them, assuming they're not doing anything, but they are providing big services for EOS when it comes to liquidity, right? And you don't know kind of what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, 1-2 brings up a good point in the chat about EOS Finex and Bitfinex kind of working together, right? And while we haven't seen a ton of news on that, I mean, like what other block producer is creating a decentralized exchange that has the merit of Bitfinex, who's a top 10 exchange in the space and runs the largest stablecoin, right?
Right. Yeah.
I get it, right? Like it's not a kind of community first approach, but I think you have to act a bit more realistically and understand that if Block 1 did not incorporate some of the largest block producers, who yes happen to be exchanges, they would have much greater problems than not including some smaller standby nodes who are maybe developers, right, and working on some wallet app or something like this. So I get it, but welcome to crypto 2020, right? Like you run a delegated proof of stake chain and there are exchanges involved. Either you're a part of it or you're not.
Yeah, 1-2 saying in the chat, EOS governance has improved throughout the 2 years of existence. There's less Chinese BPs now in the top 21. I'm not saying that Chinese BPs are bad. What were you going to say, Dimitri?
No, I was going to say, yeah, I mean, I agree with Mike on that. Even though I talk about how exchanges don't do anything and so on, but each node kind of feels their own thing, when it comes to needs and providing value, right? So yeah, exchanges for Bitfinex, liquidity is huge. They're doing some stuff in the background. Also, given the fact how popular EOS is in Asia, the last thing you want to do is just piss off those guys. You know, come on, like let's be real. You know, like working together is great, and you know, dividing where it's like, okay, Block One is just gonna vote for US now. That's it. Peace out. You know, that's not gonna be good for anyone. You know.
Yep, exactly. You don't want your token delisted from exchange. I think Kieran just mentioned that. He said can't have exchanges involved if you aren't listed on any exchanges. So no, I mean that's a fair point, Dimitri, and I kind of knew that you had talked about this previously, and it's a little naive to think that exchanges don't bring value to the community, especially when you're talking about the Chinese community, when you're talking about OKX, Huobi, all of these things. So it would have been super bad press had Block One taken a really hard stance and been like, no, they don't provide anything but liquidity for the token, you know. So it's just
USA.
Yeah. the last point I want to make about this is like EOS has gotten flooded by not only people outside of the like EOS ecosystem, but like its own sister chains. Like Wax and Talos have like really gone after EOS to try to pull people from main chain EOS over to Talos and over to Wax. And I think like Block One's involvement makes it more important, or not, I wouldn't say makes the main chain more important, but it adds value. Like if they had done nothing, I think you would continuously see this movement away from the main chain to Wax and to Talos and other sister chains. But it's funny, dude, those guys, I like what they're doing, but they shit on the main EOS protocol, and it's interesting to see. So Good. Thanks guys for sticking around through
See
that
you in
whole
12
thing.
months. Yeah, you brought it up in passing, but you know, maybe we can leave it with this. You mentioned there are like these Dan groupies, right? Who you know, EOS Jesus is Dan Larimer here. Maybe a new term for them are droopies. Dan groupies.
Oh wow.
Call them droopies.
All right, guys, we're going offline here.
Breaking up, losing network. But anyway, we'll move on to Binance. Don't forget to move that ticker down there
gotcha.
to
from
Binance.
ETH. Yeah,
Got a little too excited.
You just shilled ETH the whole time, man.
Dude. Okay. Wow. Okay, go ahead.
But anyway, we'll get rolling here. So obviously, we've been talking about Binance's smart chain, you know, which is essentially a parallel chain to their Binance chain that they have already that enables smart contracts. Some interesting development there. Essentially, the testnet is live. If you're a developer, you can go in, read the docs that they have, you know, learn how you could potentially build a dApp on top of Binance's smart chain. They already have a section called Remix where you can deploy and test that smart contract. If you just want to kind of mess around with it, they have a faucet, which is basically something that slowly shoots out these testnet tokens that you can run in and claim. Block Explorer to mess with, and obviously you can kind of create a wallet there. So shout out to Binance. That it's basically one page that summarizes everything that's going on. Super clean, right? They've learned from mistakes from other protocols in the past. It's just binance.org/smartchain. So super easy to find. Some other info on it, you know, read right here from Binance Smart Chain, or BSC. This dual chain architecture will empower its users to build their decentralized apps and digital assets on one blockchain and take advantage of the fast trading to exchange on the other. You know, obviously anybody building a dApp on the Binance Smart Chain is kind of, you know, offloading the pros or cons of building or balancing the pros or cons of building on Binance's new blockchain. Some other highlights: it is EVM compatible, or Ethereum's virtual machine compatible. There will be some sort of proof of staked authority, which you can learn more about, some cross-chain transfer functions, some cross-chain contract events like the ability to trade and transfer, which will eventually be supported, and an average block time of about 5 seconds on testnet. Last I checked, block times are running at about 3 seconds. So Binance Smart Chain is moving forward. You know, for all the bad PR that Binance has had over the last few months, you know, build is what they continue to do. So I'm sure we'll have more and more updates on the Binance Smart Chain as we continue into 2020.
Gotcha. And the last story here is that CoinMarketCap updated their listing processes, where they're kind of ranking the different exchanges. Obviously, before they were acquired by Binance itself, it was, I believe, a mixture of reported volume and adjusted volume. They've since now updated that, and I'll read directly from the article here. The market pairs of exchanges will now be algorithmically scored across 3 aspects: reported volume, liquidity, and an estimation of an exchange's user base, which has to do with website traffic. So that's basically the update here from CoinMarketCap. None of this matters because you should be using CoinGecko anyways. So we're going to go ahead and leave it with that.
Yeah,
So,
I was just gonna mention here as I'm looking at this rankings. It's just so silly, man. Like, Binance is number 1, obviously, and then it's like you look at average liquidity ranking, like, which is they give you a score between 0 and 1,000 for average liquidity. BitMEX is at 0. Like, dude, what? Like, Coinbit is at 0, Bybit at 0. Like, they have 0 liquidity. Like, what's going on, guys? Like,
They're probably not submitting API access to
Yeah,
market cap for it.
maybe
Something like that.
something like that. But it's like, man, like,
Yeah.
some of the stuff
Gotcha.
is just like.
yeah, it's definitely interesting. We'll follow CoinMarketCap as we go along, but it definitely. I mean, we called this when it was acquired, right? Like, they were going to start favoring Binance on the rankings in some form or fashion. Website traffic being probably the easiest way to do that. So that's, guys, 2 hours and 5 minutes. This is a long episode. We appreciate, guys. You were sticking around till the end of it too, man. Like, that's amazing.
There's Evan.
Is that that's Schindler?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't click into the photo, so I didn't know if that's Evan. For those of you at home, Evan used to work with us at ICO Alert. What's going on, Ev?
Said what happened with EOS? I missed it, so we're gonna need to do that all
Yeah,
over
let's
again.
rerun it again.
All right, let me change the ticker here.
Shout out to Kieran as well. Evidently that remix thing is not from Binance. It's an IDE from ETH. So appreciate the clarification there. But yeah, basically EOS, things are bullish. So what we said is once a year EOS gets bullish news. So we'll see you again June 2021.
Number go up for at least a little while. This is not investment advice, but after this episode's cleared, I'll go back in and leave timestamps on all of the different stories, so you'll be able to find out where we start talking about EOS. Really good news from EOS this week. But guys, wonderful episode. We love having you guys on all the way through. I think we peaked out at like 22, so we appreciate everybody in the chat. These were great comments as well. We look forward to continuing to do it for a long time. So Dimitri, you've got Dimitri's desk this week.
Yeah, tomorrow we're doing it at 5 p.m. Eastern. Tune in. We're gonna break down all the good stuff there. Price action, sentiment, all that.
We
Great
got to
stuff.
do EOS tomorrow now.
Yeah. I'm excited to see how much EOS is gonna pump after this episode that we did on Layer 1. So we're gonna, measure that.
Moving markets, man. Yeah, we've got the interview with Komodo this week, as well as a TBD for the end of the week. We will have one interview there at the end of the week. Adriana's in the chat from Cypherglass. Hey, Adriana, how's it going? Good to see you stop by Layer 1.
Wow, so much. This Layer 1 is now EOS 1. EOS 1 crypto.
At least for this
I love
episode.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's going to be it. Appreciate everybody stopping by. There's a Telegram link in the bottom in the description there. If you want to go to our public Telegram group, I can then message you and possibly get you into the private group. We'll see what happens there, but that link is below. Look forward to, good evening, good morning, good evening, good night. Is that where we're ending it? But
the password for the private channel is Droopies.
God.
Cute asks.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that. But awesome episode, guys. Thanks for following along. We will see you guys next week on Layer 1 Live, as well as, all the interviews this week. Dimitri's desk. See you there. Oh, Dima's going for the drinks. Okay. All right, we got to shut it off.
We better
Shut it off.
get out of here.